The Royal Canadian Mounted Police have zero record of it. Not one file, not one officer dispatched, not one statement ever taken. And yet, this story has circulated for nearly a century, printed in books, whispered in paranormal forums, broadcast across every mystery channel on the internet. 30 Inuit men, women, and children, gone overnight. No bodies, no blood, no footprints in the snow. The only evidence it ever happened is the word of one freezing trapper. It is one of the most famous mass disappearances in history, and almost every word of it is a lie. Because when you actually follow the trail, the newspapers, the records, the man who started it all, the truth isn't a vanishing. It's something stranger. A story that outlived everyone who could have proven it false. Tonight, we're not asking what happened to the village at Anjikuni Lake. We're asking why the world needed it to be true. Welcome to Protocol Red. November 1930. Kivalliq region, northern Canada. -40 degrees Celsius. A fur trapper named Joe LaBelle is searching for shelter, and he knows there should be one here. An Inuit camp on the shores of Anjikuni Lake. He's traveled this route before. He knows to expect barking sled dogs, firelight, the smell of cooking meat. Instead, LaBelle claims he finds something that will haunt every paranormal publication for the next 100 years. Silence. Absolute, total silence. And inside the tents, not a single human being. According to the legend, the evidence of sudden, inexplicable departure was everywhere. Meals abandoned mid-cook, food blackened in the pots, winter clothing folded neatly inside the tents, and rifles, hunting rifles, left untouched in the snow. In the Arctic, a rifle is not a tool. It is the margin between life and death. No Inuit hunter walks away from his weapon into -40 darkness. At the edge of camp, the sled dogs were found frozen solid, still tied to their tree, starved to death. And the ancestral graves, according to the legend, had been opened, the bodies removed. Then LaBelle ran, and the myth was born. Now, stop. Before this story goes any further, Protocol Red demands the one question that every paranormal writer forgot to ask. If 30 people vanished from Canadian soil in November 1930, where is the police report? Where is the RCMP dispatch log? Where is Joe LaBelle's signed witness statement? A mass disappearance is not a campfire rumor. It is a federal emergency. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police were the law across every meter of that wilderness. Something this catastrophic would have triggered the largest manhunt in Canadian history. So, where is the file? The Anjikuni story does not begin in a police precinct. It begins in a newspaper office. November 1930, the Pa Herald, a small regional paper in Manitoba. The author, a correspondent named Emmett E. Kelleher. This is patient zero. This is where the infection begins. Here is the first critical fact. Kelleher never traveled to Anjikuni Lake. He never examined the camp. He conducted one interview with LaBelle himself, and then he wrote what sold papers. His job was not the truth. It was circulation numbers. And a story about 30 vanished Inuit in the frozen wilderness sold papers. Look at the specific details Kelleher chose to include. The burned food, the abandoned rifles, the starving dogs. These are not forensic observations. They are narrative devices, each one engineered for maximum emotional impact on a 1930s reader. Burned food signals sudden, violent interruption. Abandoned rifles signal a force beyond rational resistance, because no sane mind leaves a rifle in the Arctic. Starving dogs signal a departure so complete, so final, that even the animals couldn't survive it. Kelleher didn't report a disappearance. He wrote a horror story. And he wrote it without ever leaving his office. Kelleher's story circulates for 29 years. Local, regional, slowly fading. Then, in 1959, it finds its true amplifier. An author named Frank Edwards publishes Stranger Than Science. Edwards was not a journalist. He was a career paranormal writer, a man whose livelihood depended on turning regional whispers into global screams. He found Kelleher's article in the archive, and he saw exactly what it was. A small story with enormous untapped potential. He picked it up, and he went to work. What Edwards did to Kelleher's story is a masterclass in myth inflation. 30 missing people became 2,000. He kept the burned food. He kept the rifles. But he added an entirely new element. Mysterious blue lights witnessed in the sky above the lake that night. No source, no witness named, no citation. And the desecrated graves, completely absent from Kelleher's original 1930 article, appear here for the first time, presented as established historical fact. Edwards didn't amplify a legend. He manufactured one from spare parts. And the world bought it. Because Frank Edwards understood something Kelleher only suspected. Fear is the most profitable product in publishing. Protocol Red follows every evidence chain to its primary source. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police maintained full legal jurisdiction over the entire Kivalliq region in 1930. The disappearance of 30 people, an entire community, would have been impossible to ignore, and legally impossible to leave uninvestigated. A report of this magnitude would generate deployment orders, search logs, officer field notes, telegraphed dispatches. We searched the November 1930 archives, regional logs, rescue documentation, any file bearing the name Anjikuni or Joe LaBelle. And we find nothing. Not a single page. Not one officer's name connected to any investigation. The file does not exist because the case was never opened. When researchers began flooding the RCMP with documentation requests in the decades following Edwards' book, the Mounted Police issued a formal, unambiguous response. The disappearance at Anjikuni Lake never happened. No missing persons report was ever filed. No investigation was ever conducted. No officer was ever deployed to that location in connection with this incident. Note the precision of that position. The RCMP did not say the case was unsolved. They did not say evidence was lost. They said the event never occurred. That is a categorically different statement, and it comes from an institution with complete archival access to every record from that era. This wasn't a single inquiry. In the decades that followed Edwards's publication, multiple researchers independently attempted to verify the Anjikuni story through primary sources. They searched Canadian federal records, provincial newspaper archives, and telegraph office logs from the 1930s. They searched specifically for Joe LaBelle's name in any official document, any independent corroborating witness, any source that did not trace directly back to Kelleher's original, unverified article. Every single search returned the same result. The Anjikuni disappearance exists in exactly one place, a chain of publications that copied from each other, each citing the one before it. All roads leading back to one newspaper in Manitoba in 1930. Here is what Kelleher and Edwards never bothered to learn about the people they used as props. The Inuit, the inland Inuit of the Kivalliq, were not village builders. They were extreme nomads, following the caribou across one of the harshest landscapes on Earth. They lived in isolated family units, 2, maybe 3 tents per group, spread across hundreds of kilometers of tundra. A static settlement of 30, 100, or 2,000 people in a single location in November is not just implausible. It is a description of a society that never existed. Kelleher wrote about a people he had never met, living in a way they had never lived. One final detail. The burned food, still warm over the dying fire. At -40 Celsius, an unattended open fire in the Arctic dies within minutes. Any food left in that pot doesn't stay warm and doesn't stay burned. It freezes solid within the hour. The dramatic scene Kelleher described, a warm, abandoned meal interrupted mid-bite, is a physical impossibility. The Arctic does not hold a crime scene in place for dramatic effect. It erases everything immediately. Protocol Red's verdict is not ambiguous. Joe LaBelle, exhausted, months deep in Arctic isolation, walked into an old, seasonally abandoned Inuit camp. Maybe he embellished for attention. Maybe Kelleher embellished it for him. Either way, the result was identical. A campfire story, filtered through a journalist who needed a headline. Trappers in the 1930s North survived the winter on endurance and storytelling. An extraordinary tale was currency. It bought you a drink, a meal, a night indoors, an audience. LaBelle's story was currency. Kelleher made it a commodity. Edwards made it a global export. And the truth became collateral damage at every stage of the transaction. The Inuit people who actually lived in the Kivalliq in 1930 were not props in a supernatural narrative. They were a real community, navigating one of the most demanding environments in human history, with knowledge and culture built across thousands of years. The Anjikuni myth didn't just invent a mass disappearance. It erased a real people, reducing an entire civilization to a punchline for alien abduction theorists who never learned their name. The greatest crime committed at Anjikuni Lake was not a disappearance. It was the theft of a real people's story, replaced with a lie that was easier to sell. Lake Anjikuni hides no aliens, no portals, no ghosts. It hides a much more familiar kind of darkness. The ease with which human beings manufacture fear, sell it as fact, and the price paid by those written into the story without their consent. The only thing that vanished into the Arctic that night was the truth. This is Protocol Red. Until the next case, trust only the evidence.